Welcome to Timeless Chronicles. Explore history, mysteries, and fascinating stories from 16 facts about Julia Tyler, the most controversial First Lady of the 1800s. Subscribe now for captivating content that takes you beyond time. Timeless Chronicles, history, mysteries. Enjoy this video. Before the revolutionary Eleanor Roosevelt or the glamorous Jackie O, there was Julia Gardner Tyler, the second wife of President John Tyler. Despite the fact she became First Lady in the 1800s, a stifling and oppressive era for women, Julia Gardner Tyler was bold, brazen, and fabulous. The wild side of Tyler's young bride was much gossiped about, but rather than letting the headlines dictate her life, Tyler dictated the headlines. She branded herself into the first celebrity First Lady through her opulent and dramatic lifestyle. She was the opposite of modesty in a time where women were meant to be modest to the core. Wild stories about Julia Gardner Tyler make her one of the most scandalous First Ladies in history. She was a strong, independent woman who did what she wanted when she wanted. These facts about Julia Gardner Tyler and her unconventional life might make her story even more interesting than that of her husband. She scandalously posed in a handbag ad. In her youth, Julia Gardner was known as a very attractive and spirited young woman. Since she came from a rich Long Island family, she was highly regarded as a prospective wife for societal bigwigs. But Gardner made the wrong kind of headlines in 1839 when she secretly posed in an advertisement for Gasp, a middle-class clothing emporium. For an upper-class woman to model in a newspaper ad at all was completely inappropriate and unheard of at the time. Her parents whisked her away to Europe to avoid further damage to her reputation. She had a slew of suitors and was a known flirt. Despite her reputation for scandal, Gardner never had any trouble gaining the affection of prestigious men. Among her romantic dalliances were a German baron, a Belgian count, bachelor and future President James Buchanan, and married future President Millard Fillmore. Gardner had game. She and her sister Margaret had so many suitors, their father had to rent an extra room to entertain them. Adding to her sex appeal was her reputation as a flirt. At the time, her explicit indications to potential suitors that she was interested in them was unheard of, and her parents were reportedly mortified by this. She refused to marry John Tyler for years. President John Tyler became infatuated with Gardner almost immediately upon meeting her. He even chased her around the living room furniture in an attempt to kiss her. He first proposed at the White House Masquerade Ball in 1843, only 5 months after his previous wife had passed away. Gardner enjoyed flirting with the president, but found him to be too old for her. He was 30 years her senior. Despite his position, Tyler was an unpopular president who had only took on the role after the death of William Henry Harrison. He was not especially rich either, so her parents did not push her into the Union. Tyler was undeterred, however, and continued to propose to Gardner and publicly woo her for the next year. She survived an explosion on board the USS Princeton. Gardner and her family attended the christening of the USS Princeton in 1844. Alongside the president and other big names in Washington. The ship boasted the largest cannons ever built on a boat, and the guns were ceremoniously blasted during the cruise. One such blast misfired and exploded on the ship, killing 6 passengers, including Julia's father, David Gardner. Distraught over the death of her father, Julia Gardner found support and kindness in John Tyler and finally fell in love. At least according to some versions of the story. David's death also made her family's financial situation precarious, and the marriage now offered her the most stable option to maintain her status. She initially was interested in John Tyler's son. When the Gardner family was first invited to dinner at the White House, Julia Gardner had her eye on John Tyler Jr., the president's son, a handsome flirt who wrote her poetry. She continued a flirtation with him for some time despite the fact he was married. He planned to divorce his wife, but Gardner eventually moved on to greener, or rather, grayer pastures in the way of his father. When Gardner initially met the president, it was as a prospective daughter-in-law. She secretly eloped with the president. Imagine the scandal today if a recently widowed sitting president up and eloped in secret with a woman 30 years his junior. That's exactly what happened in 1844, and people, reasonably, went nuts. Tyler and his new missus rationalized their secret nuptials by saying they were mourning Gardner's recently deceased father. Only 12 guests attended the ceremony at the Church of the Ascension in New York. But news broke almost immediately. Huge crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the newlyweds, and reactions were understandably mixed. She was 30 years younger than John Tyler. When Gardner married Tyler in 1844, she was 24 and he was 54. To put that in perspective, her own mother was 9 years younger than Tyler, and Tyler's first daughter was 5 years older than Gardner. While Gardner was initially turned off by their age gap, her youthfulness delighted Tyler. He was a soft-spoken, traditional Southern man, while she was an energetic and wild pot stirrer, and apparently opposites eventually attracted.